Oh, look at that 3-run shot by the other team, and you lose 3-2. You stranded 8 runners in the first 3 innings. How did you have bases loaded twice with 1 out, and you got no runs out of that thing? You were dominating. You knocked out the starting pitcher. You had everything going for you. Basketball, like, they are all over this team, but they just can't finish at the rim. Like, they're getting there. They're just like they've missed layups. They're getting steals. This is not what this team does. This team finishes at the rim, but yet they're struggling. They have dominated this game. What the hell's going on? Up 10-0 run by the other team. You lose the game. That had those feels in the first quarter with the Chargers not taking advantage of it, and it came back to bite them because, the Texans score, 10 points right before half. They get the long touchdown drive, and then they get the field goal, and they lead at that time going into halftime. And
it's a weird game in general. The whole the feel of that game, the 2 points, the
thing is, though, like, we look at the final score, but I don't really think the Texans dominated the game. I know the final score looks pretty dominant.
Well, no, because you have 4 interceptions. It's almost like the Browns.
But it was 13-6 with 30 seconds left to go in the third quarter. Like, the Texans punted with 30 seconds left to go in the third quarter, and it was 13-6. The Chargers were getting the ball. And the first play of that drive right before the fourth quarter was the pick 6, in which Herbert threw it high. McConkey has great hands. It was a surprise that he dropped it, that it went through his hands. But still, he's jumping up. He's got shoulder pads on. He's got to reach at the apex of his hands.
Zenith.
The zenith, thank you. And it goes through his hands. And former chief in the house, Eric Murray, right? Former chief. Yep. Pick 6 there. And now, instead of down by 7, you're down 14.
Yeah, not just turnovers and interceptions, the worst kind.
Yes.
Like, even the ones that weren't pick 6s were goal to go or deep red zone.
The Stingley, Singletary, I almost did it again, called him Devin Singletary. Derek Stingley, that interception right through Disley's hands.
Yeah.
That was a first down throw right through his hands. They got 1 yard on that drive, the Texans did. Texans picked up 1 yard and kicked a field goal. So you got a pick 6, a field goal, and a 2-point conversion off your defense and special teams. That's 12 points in that game that were interceptions or a blocked extra point for a 2-point conversion. That happened in the last 15 and a half minutes of the game.
Sure. And I will also say, though, at least in fairness, it is a team sport. So while CJ Stroud looked good.
They dominated for the last 15 and a half minutes is what I would say in that game. Texans dominated the last 15 and a half minutes.
C.J. Stroud looked good, which if you're a Texans fan, that's nice to see because he'd been struggling the past few weeks. The defense, which I've been lauding with talent, they put it together because of Will Anderson Jr., Danico Autry, Daniil Hunter, Stingley, all these guys. They're a very talented bunch. They found a way to put it together. But I think the bigger storyline for me is Justin Herbert. When do we start talking about him being a choker? Now, I get the Will Dissly and the interception and stuff, and we can talk about how, Ladd McConkey could have brought that down. Ladd McConkey also broke open an 86-yard touchdown.
That was a brilliant throw, though, by Herbert.
But it was a phenomenal play by Ladd.
It was, for sure.
Ladd had 197 yards.
He was brilliant, which is what gives me great optimism about Saturday's game, is that the only guy that Herbert could throw to was the guy who was torching the Texans, who's got a better oddly enough, we're talking about who's got a really good pass-catching group for this playoff game, and it's Hollywood, Xavier, Hopkins, Kelsey, as opposed to Ladd, Quentin Johnson, who can't catch the ball, and Will Dissly, that Stone Smart was coming on. So, like, what happened to Stone Smart? Like, that was like Stone Smart's this revelation in fantasy, and he's catching all these passes. He has like 1 catch, 12 yards, and Will Dissly has 2 bad drops in the game. But even that Ladd McConkey interception, shouldn't even call it Ladd McConkey interception. Yeah. Justin Herbert was protected on that play.
Yes.
And he fades to his left a little bit while I always get Ronnie Stanley and Slater mixed up. But Slater is blocking Daniil Hunter. And so Herbert, when he throws the ball, actually then goes into his left tackle after throwing the ball, but the protection was fine. He even threw it, like, he didn't throw it high because he was hit. He threw the ball, and after he threw the ball, then he made contact with his left tackle. He just threw it high on that particular play. Now, there were a couple of times where his hand got hit.
Sure.
The one that his hand got hit, and it should have been a 20-yard pass to Quentin Johnston at midfield when he jumped up and it went right through his hands. Like, that's one of the.
He had 2 or 3 bad ones.
That is one that, we talk about Caleb Williams, but I said for months leading up to the draft, I don't want the Chiefs to touch Quentin Johnston with a 20-foot pole. Like, I don't want Quentin Johnston on this team.
Well, he dropped the pole.
He would have. He would have dropped. That's exactly right. But I'm like, this guy is huge. People talk about his ability to make like contested catches. He's a chest catcher. He's not a hand, he's a chest and stomach catcher. Every big play he was making at TCU, when he jumped up, he would catch it in his chest. Like, he was just bigger than the other receivers. Like, and he's shown that in the NFL. He has the drop problem, but that was a play that could have changed the complexion. They were down 7 at that point.
Yeah.
The ball flutters in the air, and he's right there, and he jumps up, and it goes through his hands. The defensive back didn't even jump with him. He just jumped up and went through his hands. Like, you got to have guys make plays for you. And I actually thought Justin Herbert, for the most part, and I know this is going to sound contrary to what the main belief is, for the most part, against Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, the tackles, at least, Joe Alt, and he was pressured on 19 of his 36 dropbacks. 53% of his dropbacks, he was pressured. He got sacked 4 times. He had 31%, which is 11 of his 19 pressures, were quick pressures.
Yeah,
so
not great.
Within a second and a half, he was pressured. Like, that's just a complete and total miscommunication. There was another pressure from Justin Herbert right up the middle where I think it was Autry that was lined up on the center's right shoulder, and all he did was cross the center's face to go between that gap between the left guard and the center, and both those guys looked at each other. And he just ran right by him and and then they were looking at each other after play is over. I'm like, that's not happening against the Chiefs.
Especially that's playoff time.
Right.
That's week 1 or that's preseason stuff.
So they were pressuring Justin Herbert, but what's misleading in the pressures though, Justin Herbert had his longest time to throw of the season, 3.6 seconds to throw. So why were they getting pressure? Because they also had Ladd McConkey, the secondary for the Houston Texans, had the most tight window attempts of the season for them. Nobody got separation except Ladd McConkey. He had 3.6 seconds to throw on average and was still pressured on half of his dropbacks. And he's not a scrambler. He's not I'm going to run into pressure. Nobody was open. So there's a little bit of a defense for Justin Herbert, but with 3.6, 3.7 seconds to throw, I think you see why he was pressured that much is because he had that much time to throw because guys weren't open. That, to me, is not happening for the Chiefs. Not with their pass catchers and Andy Reid's scheme and Patrick Mahomes' ability to see what the defense is doing, to eliminate options and find what the first and second option is going to be and get rid of the ball quickly. Against the Texans, it was the second fastest time to throw all season. Patrick Mahomes against the Texans, second fastest time to throw all season. That's what he does in the playoffs. There's so many things of this game that I think people can come away going, the Texans, they may give the Chiefs a shot. I disagree. Like, I think all week I'm going to become more and more confident that this is going to be more Chiefs-Texans in 2019 than Chiefs-Texans 3 weeks ago.
When Danico Autry wouldn't and Mario Edwards wouldn't be as big of an issue because you have Trey, Creed, and Joe. Well, potentially Joe. Either way, Creed, Creed, and Trey.
Yeah.
The issue
Cray. Let's just call him Cray.
Let's
combine them.
Cray.
Treed and Cray.
Treed and Cray, baby.
They're so Cray
Tree
together.
Rollins. Remember Tree Rollins, NBA. But the issue then
Tree Humpsmith
will become Danielle Hunter as well as Will Anderson, the tackle issue.
Yeah.
That's the one. Juwan Taylor, that quick step.
Yes.
Let's get. I trust Juwan Taylor. Just when he's not doing the penalties. I trust Juwan. You're good enough. Listen to me, Juwan. You're good enough.
You're smart enough.
You're smart enough.
Yeah. Jack, what'd you make of that game? Did you find the Texans' performance to be as dominant as maybe the last 15 and a half minutes, I think, skewed the perception of what was going on in that game, to me, to a degree?
I think it's 100% accurate. I mean, I don't think it was a 32-12 win. I think after that first pick six, it basically discombobulated the Chargers' offense. And really, you could say that after their hot start, they got gifted some short field position, only could cash in on field goals. Mm-hmm. You know, Houston was very fortunate. They didn't get buried 14-0 to kick off. But I don't think I walked away from that game feeling any differently about the Texans. I think you give credit to their defense, but I go back to previously in the week when everybody was saying, you know, including myself, I felt like, the Chargers were the better weeks, but we were putting so much faith in the team that always screws up in the playoffs. And I thought it would be different because Jim Harbaugh had been so good this year coaching that group. They were young and talented. They got healthier toward the end. Herbert didn't make mistakes, didn't turn the ball over. And yet, of course, in that first playoff game, he throws 4 interceptions. Like, it's unheard of when you talk about that over the better part of a decade plus. But for Houston, I think they just thrived off of being doubted and being a home playoff
I agree
team.
with that.
As you opened up the show with, Vegas lives off, home underdogs and the wild card round or just in the postseason. But I still think this Houston team has the same issues it had going into the postseason. I mean, when they faced off in Kansas City, they still had Tank Dell. They're not going to have Tank Dell in the game. And I thought that really after this wild card weekend ended, based on a realistic scenario, this was the best outcome for the Chiefs. They're not having to face the Chargers a third time. They're not having to face Denver a third time. Buffalo or Baltimore will be eliminated, and you get Houston. I mean, you would have said best case is Pittsburgh gets past Baltimore.
Denver Steelers, baby.
But yeah, exactly.
But if
I guess Denver Steelers
it wasn't
in,
realistic.
But here's
Texas.
the thing. Here's something that I'll throw your way. If just to play devil's advocate on, boy, if the Steelers would have beaten the Ravens, or if the Broncos would have beaten the Bills, then obviously the Chiefs would have a different opponent. But would we agree? Let's say the Steelers beat the Ravens. So Steelers beat the Ravens. They come to Kansas City, and the Texans are heading to Buffalo right now.
Okay.
Who would we think would win that game in Buffalo?
Buffalo.
Buffalo. You think Buffalo would win?
Yes,
Okay.
I get where you're going.
So,
yeah.
So what I'm saying is
More
what if
fun to
Yeah,
watch
100%.
as a fan.
As a fan, yes.
of the NFL, Bills Ravens is going to be one of the most fun games.
I think the Chiefs are going to face the Bills or the Ravens in the AFC Championship game regardless, unless
Yeah.
they both lost this weekend. The winner was going to one of
Agreed.
those teams was going to win the divisional round.
Agreed.
And really, you feel like if you're picking between the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, is a tougher matchup for Kansas City. It's got to be Buffalo. I think head and shoulders above Baltimore when it comes to matchup-wise against Kansas City. I think Kansas City matches up much better against Baltimore than they do Buffalo. If Baltimore was eliminated, Pittsburgh came to Kansas City, I think the Bills would have dominated Houston.
I think Baltimore, a lot can depend on Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
I think Baltimore, if Zay Flowers plays, can go into Buffalo, and I think will go into Buffalo and win if Zay Flowers plays. If he doesn't play, to me it's closer. Maybe I go Buffalo to win that game. But if Zay Flowers doesn't play in the championship game and it's Chiefs and Ravens, then I really like the Chiefs' chances at that because they're so good against the run. And they won't do what the Steelers did, which was, Lamar, I don't believe you're going to run the ball. I dare you. This old greatest dual threat quarterback we've ever seen. I don't buy into it.
It's a fad.
We've seen him a couple times. Oh wait, it's halftime. Let's try it again. Let's see what we can do. I will say in the Steelers' defense, I think it was a different game plan in the second half, maybe for the Ravens, but the Steelers gave up 7 points in the second half and did not give up a point after mid-third quarter when Derrick Henry had the long touchdown run.
Yeah.
And then the Steelers got the Ravens off the field the next 3 possessions, and then the final one they just ran the ball and ran the clock out. But the Steelers had the ball down 14 twice with still, 7 minutes to go in the game. And they didn't get any points from that, obviously, because they lost 28-14.
I think they're 47 offensive plays.
Who did? Steelers or Ravens?
Steelers. Is that
Steelers did? Well, they did.
The Ravens ran the ball 50 times.
I know. That's what I thought. Different than what it was week 1 when the Chiefs were playing them. They are much more of a cohesive unit.
Yeah.
They're a better overall running team. They have figured out throughout the season how to utilize Derrick Henry more than they did game number 1 with Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Right? Or Nelson Aguilar. I'm making those guys beat me, and I'm not going to let Lamar and Derrick Henry have 300 yards rushing on me.
Well, 299.
Sorry. I'm not going to let them have almost 300 yards rushing on me. If Tylan Wallace has a big game, if Rashad Bateman has a big game, if Likely and Andrews are killing me, I'll live with that instead of, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson rush for 300 yards against you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't sleep at night if that's the case because that's what especially without Zay Flowers out there. Zay Flowers was not there. To me, it might be different if you're worrying about if they were hitting Zay Flowers early and you're like, all right, we got to adjust for this. They weren't. They were hitting tight ends, running backs, and then just running the ball. So the Steelers made it seem closer than what that game actually was. It gave you a little bit of a glimmer of hope, like, oh, wait a minute, can they get back? No, they can't. And then Denver started off pretty hot and then went away. And then after the second half of running, I think 6 plays on 4 possessions for the Broncos, Sean Payton decided it was time to yell at Vance Joseph for the fact that Sean Payton's offense gained 140 yards after the first drive. That is definitely the time to then, with 6 minutes left to go in the game, yell at Vance Joseph for whatever his defense was doing. Not stop it. Why haven't you stopped the Bills every single? We gave you 7 points. What more do you want from us? We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. More Zone next.